How are you? Very good to see you.
What happened with your hair? It's gone.
Well, there's a long story there, Jim.
You look good with a bald head. You never know how you're gonna look until you're bald, right? I mean...
Yeah, I don't know why I say...
Even the most well-respected actor in Hollywood, Morgan Freeman, has a list of people he detests. He has encountered co-stars throughout the years whose actions drove him over the edge. These are not small grievances. They originate from a man who appreciates the craft, professionalism, and respect of taking action above all else. Freeman is not easily forgiving and doesn't forget when such values are broken. This offers a unique glimpse into Freeman's raw thoughts, along with surprising names and behind-the-scenes feuds you've never heard about. Some tales will shock you, while others may permanently alter your perception of particular performers. Morgan Freeman detested the following 7 actors the most. First up, Matt Damon. The set of Invictus in 2009 ought to have been a gathering of titans. Morgan Freeman was taking on what many would refer to as the role of a lifetime after being personally chosen by Nelson Mandela to play him. In contrast, Matt Damon, who played Francois PNR, the rugby captain of South Africa that won the World Cup, was excited to appear on screen alongside one of Hollywood's most admired characters. However, something soured in the midst of the handshakes, the press pictures, and the countless hours spent working under Clint Eastwood's supervision. At least according to Freeman, it began as a joke. When the movie debuted in the UK, when questioned about working with Damon, Freeman avoided the customary red carpet chit-chat. He smirked instead, saying, "We don't get on all that good. He's got a big head. He thinks he's good-looking and all that." We didn't get on all that well at all, as a matter of fact. The press dismissed it as a light-hearted remark, but it was telling to people who understood Freeman's disposition. There was a biting edge beneath the humor, the type he saved for those who rubbed him the wrong way. Incorrectly. For his part, Damon went the high road, or at least seemed to. He told interviewers that working with Freeman was an honor, complimenting his portrayal of Mandela and noting how strange it was to be in scenes with the guy Mandela had personally selected. He talked about how much he valued the story they were telling, how South Africa loved its rugby hero, and how he trained with PNR. He didn't demonstrate that he was offended by Freeman's remark. The tension, as subtle as it was, more about Freeman's well-tuned ego radar than it was about rugby or even acting. Even though Damon isn't the most scandal-prone celebrity in Hollywood, Freeman didn't like what he witnessed. He perceived a certain self-confidence as vanity. He praised Damon's ease and lack of showiness on film by referring to him as a journeyman in a subsequent interview. Freeman, however, swiftly countered it with a scathing statement. According to Freeman, Damon had talent, yet not revolutionary, trustworthy but not adventurous. Damon kind of agreed. He responded to the journeyman remark by saying that there is a certain way of acting that usually gets rewarded. "I don't do that." According to several insiders, throughout filming, the fissures were visible. Freeman approached the position with a keen interest in Mandela's psychology, despite not being a sports lover and being publicly disinterested in rugby. Spending hours with Pienaar and the Spring, Damon was engrossed in the agility and camaraderie of rugby. Box. The 2 films they were working on were about the game and the man, respectively. And that disparity in strategy never really merged. This feud wasn't explosive, though. There were no public outcry or on-set yelling bouts, only a slight icy feeling that persisted long after Invictus was released. Damon has never publicly criticized Freeman for his large head remark, and he has never taken it back to this day. Since then, they have not collaborated. Was this a light-hearted situation? Or was Freeman ever? Is the diplomat concealing a sincere distaste within a joke? They are the only ones who are certain. It's evident that Morgan Freeman's praise is just as purposeful as his criticism. Additionally, you've most likely crossed a line he doesn't bother to draw twice if you find yourself the target of one of his thinly veiled insults. Eddie Murphy is number 2. Precision has been the cornerstone of Morgan Freeman's career. Each said word, each pause, each measured look. He views the trade as a quiet, disciplined, methodical procedure that necessitates regard for the narrative, the audience, and your fellow performers. Eddie Murphy was a very different kind of storm. Lightning-fast wit, explosive energy, and a knack for taking center stage. That magnetism was electrifying on stage. However, it turned into a collision course on the Freeman set. A cooperation that should have been a meeting of two masters from different worlds marked the beginning of their tumultuous relationship. Rather, it revealed the differences between Freeman's previous school and professionalism and Murphy's more relaxed, unstructured filmmaking style. Freeman recognized warning indicators right away. Murphy was hours late for the set. Scenes that began without planning were hardly mentioned in the scripts. For the crew, what ought to have been focused moments became spontaneous stand-up routines. Jokes, impressions, and laughter reverberating over the sound stage. This was part of Eddie's appeal to some. Freeman viewed it as sabotage. He took great satisfaction in being on time, being well prepared, and enjoying the peaceful hum of a set. Prepared to work. It wasn't simply annoying to see Murphy's antics ruin well-planned shooting schedules. Freeman felt that it was insulting to the craft of others. Later, director Rob Reiner would disclose that as Murphy's actions started to impact the performances of other performers, the tension became unavoidable. Punchlines disrupted emotional rhythms. For a joke, dramatic sequences were interrupted in the middle. Freeman's patience grew a bit thinner each time. During several takes that were marred by Murphy's failure to remain in character, Freeman's displeasure increased, according to Janet Hershenson, the script supervisor. Murphy appeared to be performing for the audience rather than the narrative, even when the cameras were rolling. Freeman's own decision was both cool and incisive. Eddie never realized that great comedy demands the same discipline as great drama because he mistakenly believed that being funny meant being professional. Murphy, on the other hand, never responded in public. His close friends asserted. He thought Freeman's approach was too stiff and a holdover from a more formal, slower Hollywood. Murphy thought that if it made the art more alive, rules may be bent and spontaneity could create enchantment. But those sparks, in Freeman's opinion, too frequently caused holes in the film's structure. Together, their scenes turned into endurance exercises. Murphy danced around the line, oblivious to or unwilling to see the disturbance he made, while Freeman held it, composed and steady, delivering his task without flinching. The conflict never descended into headlines. There were no outbursts from tabloids or public yelling contests. However, the cold persisted. Their working relationship ended when the project was completed. Since then, they have never collaborated. It's no accident, according to those close to Freeman. Morgan Freeman believes that acting is about the tale, not about himself. And that code was broken by Eddie Murphy's style of chaos, no matter how brilliant in the appropriate environment. Will Smith is number 3. Morgan Freeman's reputation was based on far more than just charisma or celebrity. He has been the epitome of gravity for many years. He is a well-respected actor in Hollywood because of his composed authority, unwavering professionalism, and commitment to his job. Freeman is not a waste of words and does not give praise until it is merited. Therefore, it wasn't an escalating argument or yelling match that caused his relationship with Will Smith to deteriorate. Instead, it was quieter and slower, the kind of breach that arises when one man's personal code clashes with the meticulously cultivated image of another. Their initial partnership got off to a decent start. Smith's energy, work ethic, and even eagerness to pick up tips from more experienced performers were all valued by Freeman. For his part, Smith appeared to treat the Oscar winner with genuine reverence. However, Freeman couldn't help but notice a pattern once the press tours got underway and the cameras started rolling. He believed that Smith had perfected the Hollywood handshake and was forming strategic alliances not for creative reasons. Friendship, but not as a means of advancing one's career. Freeman noticed something deeper beyond the easy charm and the big smile. Manipulation. Freeman, according to producer Jerry Bruckheimer, felt used. He asserted that Smith was eager to promote their acquaintance in interviews and at events, portraying Freeman as a mentor. But in private, he showed little interest in truly taking in his knowledge or counsel. The tipping moment was when Smith publicly credited Freeman for helping to shape his profession, all the while disregarding the advice that Freeman had given him. Freeman had encouraged him to select tasks that challenged his range and deepened his art. Freeman felt that Smith's career choices of brand-driven cars and high-grossing blockbusters were hollow, safe, and marketable. According to Freeman, it was the worst form of Hollywood opportunism. using the reputation of a well-known actor to boost your own without demonstrating any real regard for the values that underpin that reputation. Freeman avoided confronting Smith after that. He didn't criticize him in interviews or use the media to disparage him. Instead, when someone crossed a line, he did what he normally does. He pulled away. No one responded to the invitations. Together, they ceased making public appearances. It was a total and purposeful distance. But at last his private verdict came to light. It could not be misunderstood. It was cutting and precise. Will was able to create the illusion of depth without ever taking on the challenging. The difference between being a movie star and being an actor is the effort required to actually find it. Smith never retaliated in public. He continued to speak highly of Freeman in his interviews, describing him as a legend and applauding the chance to collaborate with him. Only Smith knows if that was true respect or more of the polished diplomacy Freeman had come to distrust. Since then, the two have not collaborated. According to reports, there isn't any overt animosity or dispute fit for a tabloid, but there is also no indication of a reconciliation. Smith continued to develop his career in his own manner while Freeman moved on, maintaining his distance. It was never a dislike of the man for Morgan Freeman. It has to do with not liking the approach, the well-planned gloss, the carefully manicured image, and the unwillingness to look past the obvious. Because sincerity isn't a brand in Freeman's world. That's the main idea. Mel Gibson is number 4. If Morgan Freeman has one unbreakable rule, it is that moral transgressions are never justified by skill. He has collaborated for decades with actors of every temperament and belief, using his signature tactful diplomacy to navigate egos and artistic conflicts. Mel Gibson, however, was unique. It was a personal matter. Mutual appreciation was the foundation of their relationship. Gibson's talent in front of and behind the camera was respected by Freeman. Gibson had won Oscars, given outstanding performances, and demonstrated a director's eye for bold, ambitious plots. Freeman initially saw a fellow artisan who shared his dedication to professional filmmaking. However, Freeman started to see a different side as their paths met on possible ventures. Freeman was extremely troubled by something that lay beyond Gibson's technical brilliance: a propensity to incorporate contentious worldviews and personal interests into artistic choices. According to Freeman, what ought to have been objective storytelling was instead used as a stage for dubious stories. Later, producer Brian Gracer disclosed that Freeman discreetly left a number of Gibson-directed projects after discovering how far those prejudices. Although the scripts were powerful, Freeman was unable to ignore the subtext, which was loaded with biased history and philosophy. It was more than just a lackluster piece of art. It was disgust for morality. Filmmakers should serve the tale, not themselves, and especially not their own agendas, according to Freeman. Continued affiliation was untenable due to Gibson's proclivity to breach that line and his well-publicized personal scandals. The last pause occurred when Freeman discovered he committed himself to a project that, to an outsider, would have been interpreted as supporting Gibson's worldview. For him, there was no way around that. Opportunity was secondary to integrity. He took a step back. Without hesitation. Freeman was outspoken in one of his few public outbursts from diplomacy. "I learned from Mel that genius without morality is merely dangerous intelligence. Furthermore, narratives that influence people's perceptions of the world have no place for harmful intelligence." Gibson never openly retaliated. According to friends, he dismissed. Freeman insisted that his creative choices were misinterpreted, calling his remarks a misunderstanding. However, the harm had already been done. Their professional relationship had been founded on mutual respect, but it had vanished. Today, there is a quiet that shouts louder than any outward conflict. They have not collaborated, and there is no indication that they will. Freeman has maintained his distance because he believes that some boundaries aren't worth pushing twice, not because he is spiteful. It wasn't for Morgan Freeman concerning dismissing a man for his errors. It was about preserving the craft he has dedicated his life to. Mel Gibson, in his opinion, had crossed a barrier that skill could never reverse. Russell Crowe is number 5. For Morgan Freeman, the movie set is a place of worship. It's when cooperation, professionalism, and respect all work together to support a narrative rather than an individual ego. He has used tactful diplomacy to handle Hollywood's personalities for decades, hardly ever revealing to the public whose co-stars. Tried his patience. That patience, however, not only wore thin but shattered under Russell Crowe. Their disagreement started on a well-known production that was supposed to be a talent show. Rather, it turned into an endurance workout. Known for his cool authority, Freeman was confronted by Crowe's fiery temperament, which Freeman considered to be chaotic and ineffective. It was a gradual accumulation of moments, rather than a single dramatic event. Crowe questioned Freeman's understanding of scenes, occasionally in front of the crew and actors. Even worse, he started directing the performances of other actors without first talking to the real director. Freeman saw this as arrogance rather than intensity. Later, director Ridley Scott would allude to the tension when he acknowledged that production was much more taxing than necessary due to Crowe's tendency to reprimand staff members and stir needless drama. Ever the professional, Freeman refrained from yelling or rushing off set. Instead, he maintained the same calm demeanor. He was always dignified. However, the frustration was evident behind the scenes. The last crack occurred in the press, not on set. Crowe publicly criticized Freeman's antiquated style of acting while marketing the movie, arguing that younger performers gave their parts greater realism. It was more than an insult to Freeman. A lifetime of honing his trade was publicly disregarded. He was unusually incisive in his reaction. Because Russell mistakenly believed that being challenging meant being profound, he never discovered that discipline, not drama, is the source of true intensity. Crowe never rebutted in public. According to those close to him, he dismissed Freeman's comment, characterizing it as a generational divide rather than an insult. However, the harm was already done in Hollywood circles. Since Freeman's well-publicized refusal to collaborate with Crowe once more, no filmmaker has partnered the two. There is no ongoing conflict today, only quiet, no reconciliations, no joint interviews, and no indication of a potential future partnership. As he usually does when someone transgresses his fundamental beliefs, Freeman has just closed that chapter. For Morgan Freeman, Crowe's skill wasn't the issue. The man's skill has never been questioned by him. The issue was Crowe's conviction that disturbance was a sign of depth and that artistic excused conceit. And in a field where cooperation and trust are valued, Freeman believes that's a boundary you only cross once. The sixth is Kevin Costner. Morgan Freeman isn't only babbling when he talks about professionalism. Buzzword. According to him, every role, no matter how big or small, on a movie set serves the plot. Collaboration is meant to take precedence over ego. However, Freeman witnessed the complete reverse when he collaborated with Kevin Costner during the height of Costner's notoriety. They started dating when Costner was experiencing an unheard-of level of popularity during the Dances with Wolves era. He was more than just the star, especially after his Oscar victories and box office dominance. He served as the producer, the director, and the self-appointed focal point of the set is Freeman's eyes. Freeman was cautiously hopeful at first. Freeman appreciated Costner's vision and talent. However, such regard was soon put to the test. Costner started to micromanage his co-stars' performances, rewrite sequences without their input, and overrule directors. Being handled by a fellow actor was more than annoying for Freeman, an Academy Award-winning actor with decades of expertise. It was against the attitude of cooperation he admired. Later, producer Jim Wilson disclosed that Freeman's tactful attempts to rectify Costner's overreach were consistently dismissed. Every choice seemed to revolve around Costner's unique vision on the set, where his word was valued more than the director's. The realization that Costner wasn't merely claiming creative control was the turning point for Freeman. Others were being harmed in the process. Scenes were changed to emphasize Costner, while more seasoned performers like Freeman were reduced to supporting roles in what was meant to be a group production. His judgment, which was given in private but was recalled by those who heard it, was both scathing and condemning. Kevin never realized that true leadership entails serving the story rather than being served by others because he mistakenly believed that success equated to wisdom. For his part, Costner never acknowledged the strain in public. In subsequent interviews, he provided a courteous surface response when questioned about working with Freeman. Level adulation, remarks that seemed less like sincere affection and more like press tour requirements. Insiders claim that Costner ignored Freeman's complaints behind closed doors, citing them as the inevitable conflict that arises when dealing with strong personalities. Since then, the two have not collaborated, and there is no sign that this will change. Their disagreement isn't enough for tabloids in Hollywood. A cautionary tale about what occurs when two very different cinematic ideologies combine. It's an open secret. The problem for Freeman was Costner's expertise was never mentioned. It had to do with humility, or rather, his lack of it. Freeman has always felt that true authority on a set comes from elevating everyone around you, even in a field where fame might impair judgment. And he believed the younger man had never learnt that lesson from Kevin Costner. Charlie Sheen is number 7. Charlie. Charlie Sheen is the most prominent name associated with Morgan Freeman's few displays of professional disdain. Not as a result of a single blow-up, but rather because over time, Sheen came to symbolize everything that Freeman finds poisonous about Hollywood. The romanticization of chaos, the acceptance of self-destruction, and the way individual carelessness may undermine the efforts of a whole group. Freeman approached Sheen with cautious optimism when they first met. In Sheen's early career, he had witnessed glimpses of genuine dramatic promise, work that revealed nuance under the tabloid facade. However, that hope was short-lived. What started off with interest in a younger. When Sheen's personal behavior started to permeate the workplace, the actor's talent changed into something more talkable. Freeman noticed the patterns very immediately on the projects they collaborated on. Sheen was erratic. Call times passed without him showing up. Scenes began without his prior planning. He was either absent, inattentive, or distracted, and his emotional beats stopped. Freeman considered the set to be hallowed territory, but it turned into an unanticipated minefield. The inconvenience wasn't the only issue. Freeman felt that Sheen's drug use and off-screen behavior created hazardous circumstances for the crew's stability and safety, as well as the integrity of the job. Freeman's private warnings regarding Sheen's behavior turned out to be prescient, as producer Chuck Lurie would later acknowledge. Soon, the actor's downward spiral became too great for any project to handle or justify. When Sheen's personal troubles started to eclipse the projects themselves, Freeman's patience finally gave out. Interviews shifted from discussing the work to Sheen's most recent outburst, putting Freeman in the awkward position of having to defend actions he neither supported nor could control. Oliver Stone, the director, even observed how visibly uneasy Freeman grew when Sheen's contrasting persona garnered more attention than their on-screen partnership. Freeman's evaluation of a colleague in private was as incisive as he has ever been. Charlie showed me that having talent without self-control is a waste. Gradually taints everyone in its vicinity, including those attempting to assist. Whether out of deference, disinterest, or an understanding that Freeman was telling the truth, she never publicly retaliated. He didn't approach openly. Although those who know him believe he was aware of the older actor's criticism, he has never discussed Freeman in detail. They don't communicate with each other anymore. No rapprochement, no collaboration, no indication of a new relationship. The chapter is over for Freeman. This wasn't about arguments over art or conflicting personalities. It had to do with principle. Furthermore, discipline is not negotiable in Freeman's code. Although talent can open doors, they quickly close and remain closed if there is no respect for the craft and those who make it possible. Ultimately, the confrontations between Morgan Freeman and these 7 actors, Charlie Sheen, Kevin Costner, Russell Crowe, Mel Gibson, Will Smith, Eddie Murphy, and Matt Damon, show a man who has his co-workers to the greatest standards, his skill, and his integrity. It has never been about Hollywood rumors or small grievances for Freeman. It's about defending the hallowed realm of filmmaking against ego, mayhem, and strategic opportunism. He doesn't turn around once that confidence is betrayed. However, how about you? Which of these feuds caught you off guard? Do you also believe that Freeman had good reason to stand his ground? Tell us in the comments section below. Additionally, remember to subscribe and like this video for more tales like as this. I'll see you later.